Hi there, my name is Jeff Evely. I'm the Officer Sergeant Major for Veterans for Freedom, and back with me now is our Intelligence Officer, Tom Quiggan, to discuss the legality of the January trucker protest in Ottawa. So what are your thoughts on this there, Tom?
Well, thanks for the intro, Jeff. It's interesting. We just had another little event today with a certain official of a municipal government trying to tell us, Freedom Convoy 2022 was illegal and you guys were helping to support them. And, the convoy was illegal. And now what we've seen recently is a series of municipal, provincial, and federal officials, all of them prefacing the word protest with illegal. It was the illegal convoy, it was the illegal Freedom Convoy. They're trying to make the point the convoy itself, the whole idea of the protest was illegal. And the interesting thing, of course, is that's false. So, a couple of different things to focus on. First thing is, there is no such thing as an illegal protest in Canada. Protesting in Canada is legal, period, full stop. It's black letter law. Now, to be clear, you can do illegal things at a protest. Smash the windows out of a building. You could burn a car. And now, if you are caught doing those things during a protest, you can be arrested and charged for, arson or damage or assaulting someone or whatever. Totally fair. You smash the windows out of somebody's building, you get arrested, that's your problem. The protest itself, the act of protest in Canada is always legal. Now, what we did get was some, shall we say, intellectually limited city councillors in Ottawa and a couple of provincial officials going, oh, well, they're doing illegal things. They're parked in the street. They're having a barbecue. They had a bouncy castle. Oh, my God, they had a hot tub or whatever. Oh, these things are illegal because they don't have permits for them. So, message to city councillors and other people. There is such a thing as federal regulations. We've got a little thing like the Constitution, for instance, and we have the Charter of Rights. Those take precedence over city bylaws pertaining to having a barbecue on a street corner or parking in the downtown core after 6 p.m. or blocking a street intersection or whatever. So while they were saying all those trucks should have been towed away because it's illegal, simple fact of the matter is the whole process went to the Ontario Superior Court. A judge heard both sides of the case and said the convoy was there legally. It is legal to protest in Canada. Now, the judge did raise the issue of the horns, and he drew a distinction between the horns blowing at all hours of the day and night and the actual act of protesting itself, i.e. freedom of assembly, freedom of thought, freedom of movement, that sort of stuff. So there was some discussion back and forth about the legality of the horns. Okay, they got silenced. But the point is this, protest is legal in Canada. The presence of the convoy in downtown Ottawa was legal according to the Ontario Superior Court judge who heard the case, and his ruling was totally in compliance with what has gone on in Canada for years. Now, there is, of course, a whole other discussion about the Ontario Provincial Emergencies Act, and then there was the Canada Federal Emergencies Act, and of course that changes everything when they implement an emergency act. Whether they did that legally or not is another question, but that's another subject for another day. After that, of course, how the rules are interpreted, how they are changed is a subject to some discussion. But even under the Emergencies Act, the Charter of Rights is still supposed to be in play. So I would imagine a lot of the cases in the future that may be heard in courts based on arrests that occurred during the Freedom Convoy, I think a lot of those cases are going to get pitched when constitutional lawyers get a hold of them and start going through them, especially given that the Emergencies Act was probably put into play under false information. That is to say, we had a number of officials such as the Prime Minister, the Public Safety Minister, the Minister of Justice, and the Emergencies Minister, Bill Blair. All of them lied, saying that the police had requested that the Emergencies Act be put into place, when in fact, no one can find a police chief that said they asked for it. So that's kind of a problem. The other thing was the Emergencies Act, especially the one on Ontario and the federal one, was prefaced on the idea that it was damaging national security because it was damaging trade. And of course, it turns out that was false as well. Trade in Ontario and in the province of Alberta for those 2 months went up, not down, notwithstanding the protest. And most of the trade was never blocked. It was simply moved through other ports. And even at that, by the time the Federal Emergencies Act came into position, both of those were gone. They dissipated and they were no longer there. So anyway, it's just an interesting little observation that we have a narrative being generated by federal, municipal, and provincial authorities that the entire act of protesting itself was illegal. And of course, we're seeing this in Calgary, the same thing's going on. The mayor of Toronto is trying to say the same thing. Oh, well, this protest is illegal and that protest, you can't do this, you can't do that. We've got the Ottawa police chief, talking about vehicle-related protests are not legal. And of course, it's all well, it's horse hockey, as they would have said on MASH years ago. It's just narratives coming from politicians that are false. Bottom line, Jeff, protest in Canada is legal as long as you're not doing something stupid like burning down cars or smashing windows out of buildings.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at the Federal Emergencies Act there, and it says right in the intro that your fundamental freedoms are still in play, your charter rights and fundamental freedoms. So even if they have that in place, then they still have to respect the right to protest. And what I understood from the judge's order was that as long as the horns were silenced, which they were, then they were engaged in a legal right to protest. And I think that was a little bit earlier on. That was around the 7th. And then on the 11th is when the provincial stuff kicked in. And then that was when they declared the Provincial Emergencies Act, and that also gave them the power to go after the finances too. So I'm always curious, like which mechanism was the were the police forces actually operating under? Was it the federal legislation or was it the provincial legislation? Because Doug Ford, he pulled that trigger just as much as Justin Trudeau did, and he passed some legislation to put those kinds of measures in place permanently. Did he not?
He did, yeah. So Justin Trudeau takes a lot of heat for the stuff he did during the convoy, and correctly so. His narratives were fake. The imposition of the act was questionable at best. But it should be remembered, the person that did it first, pulled the trigger first, and in some ways, in an even more damaging way, was in fact Premier Ford of Ontario. So for instance, the whole idea of you donate $20 or something to Give Send Go or whatever, all of a sudden, what you thought was a legal act, you can be investigated for terrorism funding. It's like, whoa, hang on. You're criminalizing the action of individual citizens who are supporting a legal protest. Now, as it came out, a number of folks, including FinTrack, the federal agency that's supposed to track money laundering and terrorism and all that, all the various agencies, including the RCMP, came out and said, yeah, no real indication that any of that money was coming from terrorist groups. And all the indications are the citizens that thought they were supporting a legal protest were in fact supporting a legal protest. So Doug Ford, I think, should be getting a little more cross-examination than he should. More deadly, as you point out, that the province of Ontario has now changed the law in Ontario to essentially normalize or put into a permanent position this emergency power, which they now have as a regular power. Strangely enough, it was passed by the legislature after hours during the nighttime without informing some of the opposition. So you kind of look at it and go, what kind of a third world banana republic are we becoming, where provincial authorities are making emergency acts permanent? It's done after hours, it's done in the dark. It's just it's like a bad movie. If a third world banana republic did this, we'd criticize them for doing it, and rightfully so. But here in Canada, it's becoming normalized, Jeff.
So I've never even heard of an illegal protest before the 18th of February. And with this provincial legislation coming into play, all of the references were towards terrorist activity. They called it a siege in Ottawa. It was crippling to the economy and stifling the movement of goods and stuff like this. And so that was the rationale that they applied in order to crack down on the protest. But like you said, you still have to respect people's rights to protest. And so even if you want to grant them the argument that illegal parking is not a valid form of protest, or that blowing horns is not a valid form of protest, even if you want to grant them all of that, it still seems to me that they went way over the top in clearing the area completely. All they, even if they want to make all of those arguments, that only gets you as far as getting the trucks out of the area. But what they did is they sent police in with batons to shove and push and beat and arrest and hit them with the butts of their guns. Just regular people that were there to protest. So even their own reasoning is not enough to justify, first of all, an emergency. When you say like illegal parking and blowing the horns, okay, so if that's not legal, then they stop doing it. But that doesn't get you as far as an emergency. And even if you want to clear all that stuff out of there, that still doesn't get you far enough to say arrest the veterans at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the way to look at this is to put it in its larger context. That the Trudeau government been in power for that point by almost 7 years. This was the first time they'd run into actual opposition. And I think what was most staggering to a lot of people in the convoy and to the politicians themselves, that this thing had not only support in Ontario and Alberta, in fact, it was cross country. It went right across the entire country and it went right across the entire world. Mm-hmm. Also worth pointing out that the failure at this point was actually on the part of the federal government. Protesting in Canada is legal. The citizenry has a right to address their grievances to the Crown, in this case, the federal government. Even the scummiest, lowest, most abused serf in Russia under the Tsar system still had the right to petition the Tsar. So here in Canada, we still have a right to petition the government, that is to say, to protest, to address our concerns to the government. Now, I don't think it's possible for the government to say they didn't notice the convoy because it was parked in their front lawn. It had the entire downtown core full of people, and the world press was there. So it was pretty clear to the Parliament of Canada that the folks, the peasantry, the citizenry weren't too happy. What needed to be done was for the government to parley, to speak. Parliament means to speak. That's where the word comes from. It means it's a place to discuss stuff. The federal government was obligated to get out there and address the concerns of the citizen. And of course, what the prime minister did was he disappeared to a secret location. He was so scared that somebody was going to get him that he disappeared for, I think it was 12 days before he was eventually sort of seen again. The failure there was on the part of the government. And I think it was such a gross embarrassment for the government to not only have this protest carry on for about 3 weeks, it was getting more and more popular as time went by. Larger and louder crowds were coming out. So I think they needed a way to crack down. They could have cracked down in two ways. One, address the convoy's concerns, i.e. the vaccine mandates for truckers and borders and that sort of stuff. Or two, say, it's illegal and let it go. But bottom line is they chose, the violent option. They chose to go after a protest, which was completely legal up to that point, and amazingly enough, nonviolent. How you get tens of thousands of people into downtown Ottawa week after week, event after event, and not have any violence is just amazing. You can't even have Canada Day, which is supposed to be like a happy day, without some idiot starting a fight or getting punched out or, trying to blow somebody up or whatever, all that kind of crap. But this was an amazingly peaceful protest given the entire context around it. So I think it's worth saying, or it's worth, reinforcing the idea that protest is legal in Canada. The convoy was legal. It went to court. The Ontario Superior Court addressed all the issues and said the assembly of the convoy in Ottawa was legal. End of discussion. That's kind of the point that needs to be made to people. So for all the city councillors and various police officials and whatever trying to say, the convoy itself is illegal, it wasn't. It was completely legal.
Right. Yeah, I think they're just trying to cover their tracks now. And you mentioned how Trudeau cowed away in the cottage there. And I can't help but wonder how much of this reaction really is coming from, a place of fear when it comes to our politicians. I wonder, if it's enough to make me wonder how far they're going to go to save their own skin. But maybe that's for a future discussion.
That's a whole other discussion, Jeff. Yep.
Yeah. All right, Tom. Listen, thanks a lot for the update and getting right on this. As always, informative, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Have a good day, brother.
Okay. Cheers, Jeff.
you.